Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lynda Stout. It's the time of year when many cattle producers start taking advantage of wheat pasture. SUNUP's Curtis Hare caught up with our extension beef cattle specialist Dave Lalman to learn about a grazing management practice you may want to consider.
There's a lot of wheat in the ground and it's starting to come up. And Dave, for the people out there who want to graze cattle on wheat, when can they actually start getting cattle out in the pasture?
I think the primary consideration is to make sure that when the cattle begin to graze, they're not pulling the plant up by the root. And so to give it enough time to mature and get some root established to keep that from happening, it needs to be at least 6 to 8 inches tall.
For a lot of producers, mainly they have stocker cattle out there on the pasture, but this can also be utilized when it comes for cow-calf grazing as well, right?
It can be, and we've talked a couple of times before on SUNUP about our project looking at wheat pasture for cows. And in that project, we discovered that if you're willing to maybe provide a little bit more management, it can be cost effective. It's not going to be for everyone, because if you just turn those cows out on wheat full time, they're going to get fat. Yes, according to our data, those calves weaned off in April at about, fall-born calves weaned off in April weighing around 700 pounds, or late April, early May, as I recall. So they can weigh a lot. But those cows are going to be body condition score 7, so really fat in April and early May. Well, then you're going to take those cows, you're going to wean the calves and turn them out on really high-quality native pasture, Bermuda grass pasture, and they're just going to get fatter. So that's why wheat is generally not used for cows, is because if it's a pregnant cow, you're probably not going to go sell her, and so creating all that body fat doesn't really return the enterprise much. And so we were looking for a way to make that more efficient. The way we went about doing it was limit grazing wheat through the winter time.
We'll get into that here in just a second, but why would producers want to take advantage of this?
So if it wouldn't be for everyone, because not everyone would have that perfect scenario, but in our project, what we did was kept the cows in a dry lot most of the time with access to low-quality prairie hay or native grass hay. Some producers may have a situation where they have a wheat field next to a larger pasture that has standing cured forage for winter grazing. And in those cases, the wheat can actually be used as a supplement for the cows' requirements, and then if they're able to put up a creep gate, the calves could graze the high quality forage all winter long and be gaining weight a lot more rapidly compared to calves that are just kept on the cow on native grass the entire winter.
So what are some management practices when it comes to limit grazing?
Okay, so the approach that we used in our project was to we started out with 12 hours per week grazing access, okay? And so what we were doing was 4 hours every Monday, 4 hours every Wednesday, and 4 hours every Friday. The first year after the end of that winter, we decided that the cows on the wheat program, compared to cows that were grazing native range the entire time, the cows on the wheat program with 12 hours access got pretty fleshy still. And those calves of course had full-time access like I described. So we backed off to 3 hours 3 times a week for a total of 9 hours per week. Now with that limited access, the cows got through the winter in about the same body condition. They didn't lose much condition, but they didn't gain much condition with only 9 hours access. So that's where we think the sweet spot is, somewhere there between 9 and 12, and probably depends a lot on the quality of the lower quality material, the pasture or the hay.
All right, thanks, Dave. If you'd like some more information on limit grazing on wheat, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Very often here on the Cow-Calf Corner, we visit with you about the importance of body condition scores at different times of the production year for cows in your herd. So I thought today we ought to just take time to review what we mean by differences in body condition and body condition scores. You see, researchers and ranchers alike use a scoring system to evaluate the fatness of range beef cows. We have a 1 through 9 system, 1 being the most thin, emaciated cow you could possibly imagine. She's nothing but skin and bones. On the other end of the scale is the 9, the most obese, overfat, wasty fat cow that you could possibly imagine. So you got those very different extremes. Where all the action is, where it's important for us to understand, is in the middle 3 scores of a 4, a 5, and a 6. That's where the real differences are. That's where most of the cattle, as you see driving up and down the roads of Oklahoma, that's the scores that they'll be in. So let's take a look at a 4 cow that is looking like she's just a little bit too thin, thinner than we'd like her to be at calving time. Certainly not an unhealthy cow by any stretch of the imagination, but just not carrying as much adipose tissue. As we go to a 5, now in the case of mature cows, if every cow looked like that in the springtime at calving time, we'd be in pretty good shape. We might see the outline of the last couple of ribs, but she looks smooth across the edge of the loin, over the hip bone. And then we go to the 6. That's a cow, in this case we've got a picture of a young 2-year-old heifer that looks smooth all over, and that's because there's just enough fat tissue between the skeletal structure and the hide to where we don't see the sharp differences. We can't see the outline of the rib cage. Along the edge of the loin it's smooth and rounded because there's some fat tissue between the hide and the bone. Why this is important is because the body condition at calving time determines how well they're going to rebreed in the upcoming defined 60 to 90 day breeding season. As you look at this graphic, you see kind of the average of a lot of research that's been done through the years as to the percent of these cows that rebred during the upcoming breeding season, depending upon their body condition at calving time. So if they were a little too thin or body condition score 4, only about 60% of them actually conceived during the upcoming breeding season. Over 80% in the case of the 5s, and then 90-some%, those cows that were in that body condition score 6 actually conceived during the upcoming breeding season. The reason that those are different is because the difference in the number of days between when she calves and when she comes back into estrus cycles to have a chance to recycle and rebreed for the upcoming calf crop. For instance, those cows that are in body condition score 4 are going to take a lot longer to come back into heat, and they may have only 1, perhaps 2 chances in a 60 to 90 day breeding season to actually conceive. The cows that were in that good body condition of a 6 at calving time, they're already cycling by the time the breeding season rolls around, and they may have 3 or 4 chances to actually conceive during that upcoming breeding season. That's why you see the difference in the rebreeding percentages. So I think it's important that we understand what these differences in body condition score mean so that you can plan your winter feeding program, if you have a spring calving herd, to make sure that mature cows are at least in that body condition score 5 at the time of calving. We'd like to hold them at that condition into and through the breeding season. The case of the fall calving cows, most of those, if we have a good summer like we had this year, are already in that good body condition of at least a 5. A lot of them are in 6s at the time of calving, and they're going to recycle on time to rebreed for next year's calf crop. We thought this review would help you as you go through this winter season and understand what's happening in your beef herd. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
It started out as a warm October, and Derrell, it seems like cattle markets are always impacted by the weather. Are we seeing that right now?
Well, there's a number of factors going on right now, I think. If you look certainly here in Oklahoma, we have had lots of warm weather. Most places have had quite a bit of rain. There are some dry spots, but in general, forage conditions are still pretty good going into the fall. That gives producers some extra flexibility in terms of managing, the timing of things like weaning and so on. Beyond that, of course, we're still watching this corn market very carefully to see what happens there. There are some threats now of some cold weather coming in up north that may put a halt to the growing season. And so some of this late maturing corn could get hit. That may have some impacts on production of corn and obviously price impacts in the market.
Back here in Oklahoma, it still looks pretty okay as far as planting weather. Do you forecast a good wheat pasture season for cattle?
Looks like we're off to a really good start for wheat pasture so far this year. USDA's numbers from this last week's crop progress report showed about 45% of Oklahoma wheat planted. That's ahead of the 5-year average. They suggest about 5% emerge. That's going to change very quickly. Again, with these warm conditions, this wheat is coming up quickly. So I think we're off to a good start on wheat pasture. I've heard anecdotally of at least one instance where a producer thinks he's within a week or 10 days of turning out on wheat. So some really early planted wheat. Probably the biggest thing producers are keeping an eye on with early wheat, there's always the threat of pest problems. So armyworms, grasshoppers, things like that will be probably the biggest challenge to making sure that we continue to see good wheat pasture development.
We always have to have some type of fun in there. Whenever it comes to
there's
growing.
always a problem.
Well, and speaking of problems, back in August there was a problem with a fire at a packing plant in Kansas. Are we still seeing residual effects of that in the market?
We are still seeing some impacts in that on the price side of things, but they are fading as we expected. Again, it's kind of like that big rock in the pond, and the ripples are getting farther away now, getting smaller. If you look at slaughter rates since then, the packing industry really did a good job of sort of using emergency actions, if you will, to keep slaughter rates up. Box beef markets went through a bubble up because of the interruption in fresh meat supplies. That has come back down and is really pretty much out of that market entirely. Feeder cattle markets gap down. They've bounced back for the most part. I think we're past most of the impacts there in both the futures and cash markets there. The fed cattle market continues to see some residual impacts. It is making progress, but it's relatively slow because, again, the squeeze on packing capacity continues to limit the demand for fed cattle, making it a challenge to get them all through there in a timely manner. I think producers just kind of need to watch this on a short-term basis, take advantage of the flexibility you have. They may want to pencil out the potential for some retained ownership of these cattle. If they've got excess forage, there may be some decent potential to keep these calves and put a little more weight on them as stocker cattle.
Okay, thank you very much. Derrell Peel, Extension Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
And now to Ouachita County to learn about the research underway to find the right way to eliminate a pesky plant.
So we're at the Marvin Clemmy Range Research Station here, which is OSU property, and so we have a series of research plots here for Old World Bluestem, and we're putting in the last of the treatments and trying to find what treatments might help us to eradicate and do a conversion from Old World Bluestem over to a native plant community. There's actually several different grasses that are kind of lumped as Old World Bluestem. The particular plot that we're in here is Caucasian bluestem, and it was planted widely through the southern Great Plains as a forage. It's used both for hay and for direct livestock grazing. And early in the season, it's a pretty good forage for cattle, but later it's not as high quality. A lot of producers are interested in converting to something else, but also from a wildlife perspective, it forms these very monotypic stands with very little plant diversity, and it's very poor for wildlife habitat. Yeah, you can find Old World Bluestems widely across the Great Plains, particularly in central and western Oklahoma. It's very common, but also folks that just have native rangelands are fighting this plant coming in off the roadways. It's very common on the roads, in the ditches, and it's a really good invader. It comes from seed very easily, so you slowly see Old World creeping into native rangelands. This is happening across the state. So that's a big problem for people that never intended it to be on their property, is it's slowly converting those native stands over to a monotypic stand of something that's less desirable. So we put these plots in throughout the summer of 2019, and it's too early right now to know what the outcome is going to be. Early results would tend to suggest that mowing and haying does nothing but maybe increase the Old World Bluestem. That really favors it. We did some summer fires in July, and thus far it looks promising, but time will tell. We also did several different types of herbicide treatments that'll take about a year to know how effective they were. So we know some of these plots we're going to have a lot of Old World Bluestem come back from seed. So we're also looking at things to try to suppress that seed germination. And some of these plots, after we've come in with a herbicide application, we're coming in and topsoiling wheat, where we've actually done some light strip disking to try to prepare the soil a little bit. So we're hoping the wheat might provide some competition to suppress the germination of the new Old World Bluestem plants. Other plots were sprayed with a type of herbicide that's soil active for 18 months with the same hopeful outcome that as those propagules are germinating from the seed bank, that the herbicide will continue to be active and kill those plants.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, wheat prices crossed a critical level this week, but why couldn't they hold on?
Yeah, I got excited. That KC December contract closed 2 days above $4.10. I said if it breaks out, we're going to continue this short run uptrend. It lasted those 2 days, then it crashed back down below it. It's down around $4 now. I think the reason it went back down is the Black Sea, specifically Ukraine, offered wheat FOB about $202 a metric ton. That's about $5.50 a bushel. If you look at ocean freight into North Africa, they've got about a 40-cent advantage to us. Port handling at Houston, 20 cents. Get at Houston to Oklahoma, about $1.25 spread. That means our price in Oklahoma has to be $3.65 to compete with the Black Sea. Our current price is around $3.80. Now, if we're competing in the Pacific Rim countries, we got an even transportation there. We can compete there because that gets our price up to $4.05. But we can't compete in the number one markets, and that's North Africa.
We also learned that France underpriced Black Sea wheat. What does this really mean for the U.S.?
Well, you got excited about that. Finally, somebody's undercutting Russia and Ukraine prices, but you're talking about 660 million metric ton there. Well, that's wheat that Russia and Ukraine haven't sold yet, and they're going to sell that into our markets and take some of our market. But now, if you bring that French wheat back, they sold it for $199 a metric ton FOB, or about $219 cost and freight into Egypt. You back that up to New Orleans, you've got $4.95 there. New Orleans price is $5.60. That soft red winter wheat's priced out of the market.
Is there any hope right now for higher prices?
Well, there's some hope, but it's very little. We've got some production problems, quality problems in North Dakota and Canada with that spring wheat. Australia's got problems with their wheat production, but that's already priced in the market.
What is the market offering then for 2020 harvested wheat?
In Oklahoma, somewhere between $3.90 and $4 a bushel.
Any hope for $5?
There's some hope, because if you look at the protein premium right now, if between 11% protein and 12.6, it's $1. You add $1 to that $4, you got $5. Or the Black Sea area, their stocks are projected to be relatively tight. If something happens to that crop, we'll have $5 wheat.
Lots of variables there. Okay, Kim, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Welcome to the weekly Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. September has been a month for the weather record books. It came in as the fourth warmest since record keeping began in 1895. This map shows you our average statewide temperatures for the month, coming in at 79.4 degrees Fahrenheit. When you compare that to the Mesonet long-term average, we see most days were 6 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the expected for this time of the year. Also, for several weeks now, you have heard me talk about the oppressively high dew point averages. This is a map of the average dew points for the month, running in the 60s and 70s for all but the Panhandle. When you compare that to the 15-year average, we see that they ran mostly 9 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit higher than expected. The good news is we are finally receiving the first cold front of the fall. Expected temperatures on October the 3rd show cool air entering the state. It will continue to move south and bring a much refreshing drier air with it as well. Gary is up now with a look at some long-range forecasts for temperature and rainfall.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. I think we can all agree we were ready for September to get out of here. It was just plain nasty. Ended up as the 4th warmest on record, and that dates all the way back to 1895. Although it was really dry up in the northwest and parts of central Oklahoma, we did get some pretty decent rains across much of the state, especially down there in southwest Oklahoma, which really needed it, up in northeastern Oklahoma, and then down in far southeastern Oklahoma. Those rainfall amounts range from 11.6 inches down in McCurtain County to just barely 1/10 of an inch up in Woodward County at Freedom. Now, relative to normal, that amounts to just above 10% for much of the area, up to 25% in northwest Oklahoma and out into the Panhandle. And also in central Oklahoma, we had that area below normal precipitation for September. But we also see those generous amounts across the southwestern quarter. That's the area that needed it the most. And then over in northeastern Oklahoma, north central Oklahoma, and then, of course, down in southeastern Oklahoma. So quite a mixed bag last September for rainfall. Now let's take a look ahead at the October outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. For temperatures, we see increased odds of above normal temperatures across the entire state, but especially across the southern 2/3 of the state. For precipitation, we see increased odds of above normal precipitation, generally across the northwestern third to a half of the state, but especially up in the far northwest and the Panhandle. Put those together and look at the drought outlook for October. We see drought expected to persist down in southwest Oklahoma, but expected to improve up in northwest Oklahoma and that little blotch up in the Panhandle. So it does look like we're going to get into a more fall-like pattern. All I can say is that we deserve it. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Traditionally, we think of agriculture as one certain way, but Lynda, there's some new approaches that's actually been more healthy for the land.
Yeah, we're trying to take a sustainable approach. And that's more of a natural approach to farming. We've had the conventional methods for years, and we're finding that it's depleting the nutrients in the soil. So one method we're trying to do is use cover crops, as far as using that to add organic matter and replenish the soil nutrients, and it also adds nutrients in the soil. Things we like to do is in the fall, after you remove your crops, go ahead and go in with a cover crop. And this cover crop, we like to do a mix of wheat and rye, and crimson clover is a good one to use, as well as some tillage radish. And that's able to increase so much soil nutrients as well as organic matter, which also increases the water holding capacity and reduces compaction. The old traditional methods of using the synthetic chemicals and fertilizers, are getting expensive and costly, and we're trying to do away with that expense a little bit, and in going this more natural approach, we're able to decrease some of those inputs and go more of a natural way.
And you just mentioned some of the crops that are going into this plot right here. Talk about actually deciding which ones you want to introduce into the soil, because certain ones bring certain benefits, and then how did you plant this?
Okay, we try to do a mixture, and you can just use one certain thing, but we found that when you use grasses like wheat and rye, you're going to add a lot of organic matter to the soil, and then your legumes will add that, and we like a crimson clover. Those will actually, as they decompose, once you till them under in the spring, they will actually add nutrients to your soil.
This field that we're standing in here, this was planted not too long ago, and so there's still an opportunity for producers to take this approach.
Oh yes, I think you've got till probably the end of October to get your fall cover crops in. In fact, this field right here I planted exactly a week ago, and as you can see, we've already got quite a bit of wheat and some of the legumes coming up in the soil. So it doesn't take long with the right conditions and moisture.
And these are things that Oklahoma producers can learn about in an upcoming conference you guys have.
Yes, we've got a conference coming up October 9th and 10th. It is at the OSU Oklahoma City campus at the Student Center. We have several keynote speakers that are going to talk about cover crops, improving soil, fertility, and biological health of the soil. And there's also a full schedule available at www.hortla.okstate.edu.
Well, that's great information, Lynda, and we'll have a link to that on our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lynda Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.